going to be doing here is essentially a live demo where I start completely from scratch, and by the end of the demo, I will have hopefully at least opened up a PR on the Apache GitHub repo. And just to kind of give some context here, so when I opened up my first PR 2.5 years ago, I wish I would have had someone like myself right now sitting next to me to explain all of this, because this was actually very, very confusing to me. And kind of keeping in mind that I've been using Git for a very long time, just making pull requests where you're working off of a fork is slightly more involved. So there's some more kind of Git bureaucracy that you have to get right. So I'm gonna be walking you through all of those steps. So am I sharing my screen already?
We can see it.
Yep. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I have my browser pointing to the Apache repo, and to be able to make a pull request, you actually first have to start by forking the project. So you have to have a GitHub account, and then you're going to make essentially kind of a copy of whatever is on the upstream repo. So what you have to do is you just go up to the fork button, and then you choose which account makes the fork. And this so this takes a while. So it essentially just kind of makes a carbon copy of the official repo and moves it over into your namespace. And now that I've done that, you can see here that it's under my GitHub name / Incubator Superset. So then to be able to start actually working with this, I just go to code, and then I copy the URL for this. And then I go over into my console. And of course, here you could use whatever Git version control client you want to. But personally, I found that I was actually using a bunch of kind of GUI clients before, and I never really got the essence of Git until I actually started using the console version. And I think, within more or less half a day of using the CLI version, I understood much better how Git works. So something to keep in mind that in this case, I think actually using the command line might actually be less confusing than using one of those GUI tools. But I think this is very much kind of down to personal preference. So then to be able to get the code down, I just write Git Clone and then the URL. Right. So now in this case, I actually already have a directory called Incubator Superset. So I have to give an alias to it. So I'll just make local copy. And now it starts pulling in everything. So I think this actually kind of pulls in the full history of the Superset repo. And then I go into this directory. And as you can see, I have everything here that the web interface is showing. So then to be able to actually start working on the code, you need to install a bunch of dependencies, and I seem to have the old ones open. So what I usually do is I use virtual-env, which creates a virtual environment of your Python existing Python environment. And this helps keeping the Python environment as clean and kind of superset specific as possible, because otherwise, if you're using the global Python installation, whatever you install here in Superset is going to be interfering with everything else you install elsewhere, and vice versa. So it's tends to be kind of a good idea to always make a local virtual environment. So then I just write virtual env, and then venv. This tends to be kind of the convention. And then on Mac, I just write source venv bin activate. And now I have the Python version. If I run pip now, it's going to install everything under the virtual environment. And the superset Python dependencies are stored under the requirements directory. So I can just write pip -r requirements, and then it's the file called integration.txt. These can be slightly confusing, and these have actually changed fairly recently. So it's a good idea to check the contributing.md file on the repo on which one of these files you should be installing.
For reference, I've been contributing for 1.5 years, and I always just go back to contributing MD whenever I need to start from scratch. I haven't memorized any of these.
And now, fortunately, I seem to have most of these cached. Well, this is interesting. So now it's just finishing the installation. Okay, so now it's done. And on Superset, we're using something called Precommit hooks. And what this does is when you make a pull, or when you're making a Git commit, it checks for certain linting rules. So for instance, if you're making changes to Python files, it's going to check that that your lines aren't overly long, or you're using kind of double quotation marks and not single quotation marks. So there's kind of a bunch of small kind of style-related checks that are being performed. And it actually does the same for markdown files and JavaScript files as well. So instead of, because we're using a bunch of linters here, so instead of you having to kind of run all of these manually and kind of memorize whatever rules they tend to have, you can just use the pre-commit hooks, and it's going to kind of automatically reformat your code. So and that's going to make it kind of much quicker for you to get pull requests going. But so before you can actually use that, you have to install them first. So you write pre-commit and then install. And now the hooks are installed. So when I make a commit, it's going to run these checking hooks. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to make a very simple PR. So, and I was actually looking at the README here today, and I noticed that if you guys know Markdown, I believe the headline should have equal signs underneath it for as long or as many characters as the headline itself. And as you guys can see, there's one character too much here. So I'll take that one character out. And now when I check Git Diff, I can see that there's one line changed, so one removed and one added. So then I'm just gonna git add and all updated files. This tends to be, well, this is kind of comes down to taste again, but there is a command for git -a that adds anything that has changed and that isn't on the git ignore list. That's a very dangerous pattern to use, and that's a perfect recipe for if you have some passwords or anything, any kind of secrets in this directory, which tends to happen if you're using .env files, for instance, that tends to be a perfect way of exposing all of those secrets to the world. So what I usually do is I use git add -u, which then adds any updated files that aren't, so it doesn't add other files that are present in this repo directory. And then I'm going to make a commit, and in Superset we're using a PR message linter, which checks if you kind of have to prefix your message with what kind of a change you're doing. So I'll just show you guys. So there's under the GitHub directory, there's something called PRlint.json. And here you can see that these are kind of acceptable patterns. So if you prefix your commit message with anything else than build, chore, CI, docs, feat, etc., it's gonna block you from merging your pull request. And the reason why we're doing this is to be able to kind of have to be able to make summary statistics of, you know, how many fixes are we getting in, how many PRs are dealing with documentation changes, and so forth. So it's basically just kind of a way of having better kind of documentation of what kind of PRs are coming in.
Really, sorry to interrupt. Could you make your terminal screen slightly shorter? I can't see the last line of what's being written.
Okay. Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so this is a documentation change. So then it's going to be prefixed with docs, and then it's usually a good idea to, and this is actually something where people, you know, even very senior committers tend to kind of forget that it's actually very helpful if you make a good PR title, because if you only have one commit in your PR, it's the commit message that's going to be the title of the PR. So try to squeeze as much kind of information into this message to be able to make someone who doesn't have any context of what you're doing understand as quickly as possible what the change is all about. So I'm just going to say fix incorrect markdown on Readme. And so what this does now, it runs all of these linters, and then it actually failed one of them. And what it does is, if you check Git Status now, it's going to show that the modifications I just made, those are actually staged, but then the reformatting that one of the linters did, that's modified and it hasn't been staged yet. So, and I usually do this just to kind of keep learning to be able to kind of write correct code without having to use the reformatting linters. So I can just check what the change was. So Git Diff. And what this linter here does, it's kind of an insignificant change here. This has to deal with Python 3.6 versus Python 3.7. So there's a file that specifies any third-party libraries. And one of these libraries used to be a third-party library, and now in Python 3.7, it's no longer a third-party library. It's part of the standard library. So it's just kind of making a change to one of those files. But then if I'm happy with this change, then I just write git add -u, which is add all the updated files, and then I rerun the same git command or the git command commit command that I ran previously. So when the pre-commit hook failed, it actually failed the whole commit operation. So if I look at the Git log, you're going to see that there's nothing here. The commit that I was trying to make didn't appear on the Git log yet. So I have to kind of make the commit again. Now it was okay. And I'm actually signing all of my commits. This isn't mandatory, but it tends to be kind of a good practice to sign your commits. So when that's done, then I can try to push. So what I've done here is, oh, and I actually did something that was kind of bad. It doesn't kind of make that much of a difference if you're just working off of your own fork, but you should actually always create a separate branch for every pull request that you do. So I can actually do this kind of afterwards. I can just write git checkout -b, which is, it's going to be creating a new branch and then checking out that branch as well. And then it tends to be convention to have your own name dash and then what this feature is all about. So it's readme headline. And then if I try to push this, it essentially states that you don't have a branch like this on the on your fork or on the remote fork. And what I'm saying here is please create a branch on GitHub and then sync this branch with that. So now I have my branch. That branch has one commit that isn't on the main repo or on the main fork. So if I go over to my browser now and I look at my my fork, it should be showing. Oh, that's strange. Oh, actually, yeah. Yeah, so it's, I'll just try to do this again because okay, I must have done something strange here, but anyway, so I go to open the pull request, and here what it's trying to do is, okay, yeah, so it's comparing master because I already pushed my master branch. So I'm going to be making my pull request off of my master branch to the upstream repo. And then I just push here, and now because I just had one commit, it's taken that the message from the commit and it's using that as the title for my pull request. And then I write a summary here. So it's just essentially remove unnecessary headline character. And then the test plan. So we actually have a CI job that tests whether or not we have compliant markdown in our files. So I think if I was to make something that's non-compliant, it might actually be kind of fail the CI workflow. So then I just hit create pull request, and now there's a pull request open. And then I can ask for a committer of the project to review this pull request. So now I'm gonna ask Eric to review this pull request. And when I do this, I'm assuming Eric's going to get an email stating that, hey, Ville wants you to review one of his pull requests. And then to be able to merge one of these, you obviously have to be a committer, but then the pull request actually has to pass a bunch of these CI tests. So if you're kind of trying to merge code that's broken, CI is going to block that. And that's pretty much it. So once you've done this 1,000 times, it's very simple. But I guess there's a bunch of kind of small steps here that are easy to forget. And actually, there's one more thing that's good to remember. And that's if you look here at if you look at the remotes, the only remote the only remote that I have here is my own fork. So if there's stuff happening on the upstream repo, which is very much active, and there's pull requests being merged all the time, those aren't going to show up in my fork unless I specifically kind of update my fork somehow. So I have to keep my fork in sync in some way. And actually what I have to do now, because I broke my master branch is out of sync with the upstream. So I'm actually going to be using reflog to reset my master back to what it was originally. So now to be able to sync from upstream to my own fork or to the local copy, I'm going to go to the upstream repo, and then I'm going to just copy the URL for the upstream one, and then I'm going to write git remote add upstream and the URL. And what this does is, now that if I want to sync from upstream to my local repo, I'm just going to write git pull upstream master. So this pulls in any commits that have been merged into upstream after I did my fork. So I think I did my fork like a few hours ago. So apparently within those few hours, someone has actually merged a PR on Superset. So I think that's the basics. There's nothing much more to it. So does anyone have any questions?
I can just do a comment or two. So I think this is like just normal kind of contributing to open source type of GitHub workflow. So like most people should be familiar with that. For people who are less like software engineers, I don't know exactly the profile of people we have on the call. There is a way to do that from the GitHub UI, where you can actually click the edit button on the README, for instance, and you can, it will take you through a kind of pull request flow too. And then I would just, like, as to how to do that, I would probably just refer to like the GitHub documentation. But it's possible to do that like completely on the GitHub UI and make edits to documentation and submit your PR straight from there.
Yeah, so that, Vincent, Adam, Jagdish, Susanna, Eugenia, like, what questions do you guys have?
The Git CLI that you were using, Ville, was that the Git desktop app?
Which one you mean? Because I was just
the console that you were in. What app was that?
GCL he's talking about. GCL.
Yes, so that was just the Mac terminal.
Okay.
We have a fancy prompt on there.
Yeah, what prompt are you using? That's pretty cool.
Oh my.
I can send it. I can't remember anymore. I'll figure it out. Just a second.
I think it's all my ZSH. That's what I used to use. It looks exactly like that.
Yeah, I use a different one for Git that shows kind of current branch, if you're ahead or behind, and it shows other like Git related information.
Yeah.
I can share too. All my RC files are in a .file repo. That's public too. So.
This is actually power level 9K.
Fancy.
Cool. Other questions about contributing to Apache Superset?
Yeah, I had one. So I guess firstly, just to talk about like profile, I do more like of analytics stuff. I don't do a lot of software engineering. So this is more of like curiosity, and I tend to contribute at some point, but I probably won't be like a core contributor. But so when you're creating a PR, how do you just knew which reviewer you'd like to review your PR, but if you don't know, like, what is the process for figuring that out?
It gets picked up. I think it's the story in general. Like we have people monitoring their repo, and like we try to honor all the PRs that come in. There's no real kind of process for it. I think we're going to do more triage. We're looking to involve more people in triage, which is a new role that GitHub released like 6 months ago. So now there used to be just like kind of write and admin, like writer and administrator on the repo. Now they introduce triage, and then I think it's easy for us to give more so if the champions are interested in having triage, that's one way you can help. I wanted to say too, in terms of becoming a committer, you don't have to contribute code necessarily. You have to contribute to the project. There's a lot of different paths to committerhood. So one can be contributing to the docs or triaging, or it can be just being an active community member. It could be answering questions on Slack, contributing to Stack Overflow. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can contribute, and all these contributions are recognized. They're not super well accounted for, in some cases, but at least I think it's easy for us to make a case of like, hey, we want this person to become a committer because I don't know, they've given some talks or they contributed to the docs, right? And that's a different path to it. Then you don't need to necessarily have right access to the repo to do that. So it's more of a recognition of merit. And then you can become more active too in terms of governance. So you get to vote on who else should be voted a committer, which SIP should we pass, that kind of stuff.
I see.
So yeah, so in terms of governance model, like the only thing that you can do or that we kick off votes for are SIPs, so Superset Improvement Proposals. Who else do we vote in and releases, but that doesn't mean you cannot have influence without being, a PMC member. But yeah, so the short answer is like, yeah, we do get to monitor the repo, and ultimately all issues and pull requests should get looked at. That's not always the case. So sometimes you need to ping. So you'll go back on your issue and ping, and then, people will, and you might try to ping people on Slack. And I think it's fair to ping up to like once a day. It's like kind of overwhelming to people, but but I tell people like, hey, if you have open a PR with an open source project and no one's paying attention to it, I think it's totally fair to be like, hey, what's going on here? Are you guys taking pull requests? And then there's no guarantees that someone will look at it, but in a healthy, fast-paced project like this one, like everything should get reviewed. So, yeah.
Thanks for that.
Other questions? All right, then we can end with